CatF. Welcome to World War II Live. I am your host, John C. McManus. Alongside is my good buddy and co-host, Kevin Hymel. And of course, on the margins, sort of, is our amazing producer and chief of staff, Mark Festoso, who will be interjecting here and there. Let's be honest, herding the cats. So, World War II Live, so informal. We're going to be taking questions later. Kevin and I over the years have really enjoyed just sitting down, interacting, discussing various aspects of World War II, and taking questions from people, and just kind of just seeing where the conversation goes. So, of course, we can't do a World War II podcast without addressing Omaha Beach, which I'm obviously obsessed with. Everybody who has any inkling of me knows that. So, Kevin, Omaha Beach, where do you think we ought to begin our conversation about that today?
Well, John, just happy to be here as the Tonto to your Lone Ranger. And I was thinking where we really got this started was we were giving a tour of Omaha Beach for the 60th anniversary of D-Day, and we were one of what, like 7 or 8 buses. And so for like 3 days, we rotated around the beaches giving tours, and then we started going across Europe. And John, you and I got sandwiched onto the same bus and we just started taking questions from everybody on the bus, and we were having so much fun. We said, let's make this into a show in about 20 years. And here we are. So,
And you are very farsighted. Yeah.
yes, thank you very much. So, I guess I'm going to start off, just like you read about Omaha Beach, read about D Day as a kid, always fascinated by it. And then I guess it was in 2000, I went to Paris, went and visited spots in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium and Luxembourg with some friends. And then I went by myself to Normandy and I got to Omaha Beach right at sundown. I could have just gone to the hotel, but I'm like, I've got to see this thing. And I ran up, I parked my car and I came in, I guess it was the Les Moulins draw, which is the second one to the west. It's not the furthest west, the famous one, Veerville with Tom Hanks, but it was Les Moulins. And I just went running up to the beach and looked out over the whole expanse, and it was low tide. And all I could think, was Gettysburg and Pickett's Charge. Because when you look at that beach at low tide and realize these guys had to come, what, 5 football fields,
Yeah, buddy.
up to just to get to the base of the hills. I mean, what you can imagine what a slaughter it was just from that instant of standing there. What about you, John? What are your first kind of impressions of good old Omaha Beach?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I physically saw Omaha Beach, I was fresh out of college. I was on a family trip with my parents, and we had visited Britain and Ireland, and then we went on to France. And, we went all around Normandy to look at various battle sites, which they were kind of indulging me in that, as you can imagine.
Your poor
And I had
parents.
a, kind of similar experience to you in that, coming up on Omaha Beach where you could see the vista of the whole thing. And of course, it's a crescent shape. It's like 4.5 miles or so. And I remember looking down and thinking something of the same thing you did. It wasn't low tide, I don't think, but I could be
Mm.
wrong. But I don't remember it that jarring. But
Yep.
I just thought to myself, this is a really untenable position here for any attacker. And it's just, and also, but also too, the other thing, and I'm sure you might have had this experience as well. We'd read about it our whole lives. And as Americans, we can't just go over to Omaha Beach each day.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not
it's,
Gettysburg. It's not,
yeah,
Custer's Last Stand. You have to physically go across an ocean to
it's
see
a big
this and the
trip.
cemetery and everything. Yeah.
It's a big trip, especially from the perspective of somebody that young. And so to me, it was like, oh my gosh, this is real. This actually exists. I
It
can
really
see it
does
and
exist.
smell it
Yeah.
and touch it, and so that really made it tangible to me. And actually, it kind of built, as I said, jokingly, but really, this is serious. It built an obsession on some level that
Hmm.
I was like, I've got to know more about this. It's iconic, of course, but I just thought, man, there's more to delve into and more to know, and of course our intro too. I should explain. This is the only time I'll explain this in our podcast. It's
You
our
can
maiden voyage, of
explain it
course,
5
but
years from now, when we're big.
so
It's a
it comes from, of course, a movie about Omaha Beach, partially Saving Private Ryan. If you remember, Tom Hanks is playing Captain Miller, and I guess he's interacting with a shore party guy on the radio. He looks to be Army to me, I think. And eventually, of course, the man is killed, and Hanks takes over the radio, and he seems to be, calling someone, and he says "CatF, CatF," and then he realizes the radio is destroyed. So that's why we have that. Again, the Omaha Beach tie-in.
But John, what does CatF mean?
I've always wondered because I don't think it's really a true call sign that you would have had that day, to my knowledge. But you know what? I could be wrong. It's not like I know every call sign or
Right.
something. But have you ever run up against that? Like,
No, but it sounds to me like something I remember from reading about the history of NASA, that when the astronauts were in the space capsules in training and they would say, "Is everything okay?" They'd say, "It's okay." And they wouldn't be able to hear okay because the mic wouldn't pick up. So they started saying everything's A-okay. So they would, by saying the A, it would catch. And so I think CatAF is a very sharp, word. It's got those consonants in it. And I think it would perk up the ears of a Navy communicator out on a destroyer or something, offshore. So that's
yeah,
my theory. Yeah. But I think it's
yeah,
a very
good
cool
theory.
intro. You're a genius to have come up with that, John. You're
Wow,
really
yeah,
brilliant.
absolutely. Thanks for recognizing my genius.
Of course, my friend. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
came
that's
up with it.
pretty pretty much your only value to recognize my genius, and I do appreciate that.
There you
But
go, buddy.
no, but you're probably right that it's an alert, maybe an alert
Hmm.
science, phrase or something like that. But the shore parties were really marginalized that day too, and that's one of the other aspects of this. They're there to communicate on some level, but that element of this, I won't say it failed, but it really didn't come into play as much as it could have.
Well,
And they had to learn a lot of lessons.
I talk about that in one of my books. I've wrote, as you guys know, I write a lot about General Patton, and he really was our most experienced amphibious commander, believe it or not. By the time you get to June 6th, he's done North Africa, he's done Sicily 4 times, landing in the south and then repeatedly in the north. And, one of the problems was poor communications with the shore. And so I've always said I think if Patton had been in command of D-Day, he would have doubled up those guys. And we both read accounts where soldiers come across a dead guy with the radio on his back, and so they grab it and start using it. You've got to calculate for that stuff. And it reminds me, Dr. Russell Weigley, who taught me at Temple and wrote some brilliant books, said about Normandy or Omaha Beach. He said an amphibious assault is by nature a frontal assault. You can't go around the enemy. You can't trick the enemy. The enemy knows exactly where you're coming. So you have to have this overwhelming amount of firepower to keep his head down. And then there's this like almost math you have to get perfect, because the most dangerous spot is that moment the soldier steps off the landing craft to when he gets on solid ground. That in between time is the most dangerous. And that's where you have to have that precise math that they don't have too much equipment. They have enough equipment to fire on the enemy and survive, but not too much where they're way down. And they did not get that math right on June 6th.
No, they really didn't, especially with the equipment. I mean, that too. There's just way too much stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
they're thinking. I've said this before. They're kind of thinking like logisticians rather than assault commanders. The whole point is basically to assault this position, to take it and develop it. Now you can develop it later when you've got a whole fleet out there to land a lot of these supplies. Now this is only my opinion, but I've thought this for years as I've studied it. There's really no point in having any artillery come ashore on the first day, as far as I'm concerned, because the Navy is your artillery, and it's a matter then of communicating with them.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
they do
kind
a
of
great
amazing
job.
to think of.
They do a great job, the
Oh,
Navy. Yeah.
once they can figure out the targets and whatnot, they do an
Mhm.
incredible job. The pre-invasion bombardment, of course, is next to useless, but that's not really their fault. It's just the nature of the beast. It's only 45 minutes. You couldn't do too much in that time frame. They wanted the element of surprise.
And John, one of the things they do, and I don't know if this was pre-planned or not, but a lot of the tanks, when they would fire on these emplacements, the 75 millimeter wasn't getting the job done. So they started firing their machine guns with tracer bullets at them. The Navy could see that and then fire on those bunkers. I don't know that that was planned out in any way. I think that was just something
Mm.
like, hey, we got to do something to turn this around.
I think that's exactly it. It was very much impromptu. And that's
Mhm.
why it's like, here's these years of elaborate planning. all this ingenious stuff, these plans and devices we've got and all this firepower and all that. And then it comes down to, a guy in a 50 cal or a 30 cal with his tracers going towards an embrasure someplace, or in at least one case, literally a guy waving and, like pointing
When all
that
else
target there.
fails,
And here,
there.
yeah, exactly there. And here comes a destroyer with a 5-inch gun going and nailed the position. And that
Bam,
those are
bam.
really effective that day.
Yeah.
Most notably, and you've seen this spot, WN65, that pillbox, right in
And
like
real quick,
this.
John, tell them what a
Yeah,
WN is. What's a WN?
it means Widerstandsnest, and of course my German pronunciation is awful, but it basically
You're
means a
terrible.
strong point.
Terrible. Yeah.
Strong point. Yeah, I know you're an expert German linguist, so
Yeah.
thanks for the critique. Yeah, nine. Yeah, you got it down. Your language skills are very impressive. But yeah, I mean, those are strong points, and because they can't defend the whole beach with everything, and so they defend the likely exit points, and that's the whole struggle here. And WN65 just gets nailed. It's a pillbox. It's still there today. You can visit it, and it gets nailed by 5-inch gunfire, tank fire, anti-aircraft fire, 75 millimeter pieces, probably, machine guns. I mean, you name it. And you can see the concrete is chipped. And of course, these being Americans, the veterans are going to bicker for years over who took out the pillbox and who
Right.
neutralized it and all this. And I see that as so beside the point. I mean, they all did, so
And
that's what matters.
and then just a step back. So like the plan is, we send bombers in a tactical role flying over the beaches, and we're going to knock out all their strong points by, flying perpendicular to the beach, dropping bombs, which is a terrible idea at night
Yep.
in under clouds. And then you're going to have tanks, tanks that can float, coming up with the infantry, and you're going to land on a big broad front so the enemy can't concentrate on anybody. And you sweep forward and up those hills, and it just breaks down from the get-go. And so you've got at Veerville Draw, the guys doing exactly what they should. They landed at 6:30 a.m. intact. They couldn't even see the other companies. They're so far away and off schedule and landing in the wrong places. So the Germans can immediately concentrate their fire. And that's exactly what you see in Saving Private Ryan, that
Yep.
perfect kill zone. And it's really up to those guys on the beaches, under fire, making those decisions and figuring out while trying to survive. And I think that's what makes it so dramatic and so fascinating is that the plan breaks down, but the humans on the shore, those guys with their training and integrity and skill, turn this really a defeat into victory.
It's a
And
junior leaders fight.
yes, that's a perfect way to put it you know.
Yeah.
And I always say that, I say that if the plan had worked and the infantry had gone up all those hills and moved inland like a mile, we would have lost the battle. Because the key to Omaha Beach, and argue with me all you want, are the four draws. And draws are roads that are cut between the hills because you've got a mechanized army with tanks and trucks and jeeps. And if you don't get those draws under your control so you can bring all that stuff up, the enemy's going to make you pay for it. And so that's why you hear about Veerville Draw and Coville Draw. There we go. Everybody kind of focuses on the beaches, like so you can see dog green, dog white. That's how a lot of historians talk about it. But it's those roads leading, and it looks like they're leading south, which
Oh,
they really are. And so, you've got the one on the far west. That's Veerville Draw. That's Saving Private Ryan. And then as you come east, what is that, John? Les Moulins Draw,
lay them alone.
which is the
Right.
widest. Veerville is the only paved road in the whole area. That's why it's so vital. Les Moulins is the widest. And then next is what, the Coville Draw, John?
Saint Laurent, and then
Saint Laurent.
Colville.
You're right. And
Yeah.
then Coville. And then all the way on the end, that last blue triangle to the far right, I guess that's Coburg, which is not really a road. It's more like a groove, I would almost
Well,
say.
there's no roads in the first division sector. In fact, the draws are just ravines, natural ravines, and we're going to build
Hmm.
roads. I mean, so this is very much an engineering problem. One out of every four of the soldiers who goes ashore at Omaha Beach on D-Day is an engineer because
Yeah.
there's so much to deal with in terms of mines and obstacles, the log obstacles, road building, explosives. I mean, all this kind of stuff that you've got on an engineering mission. The gap assault teams obviously are a
Yep.
huge part of this. So that yeah, I mean like you said, in terms of the original plan, it's basically supposed to be a combined arms assault to overwhelm them, that they can't focus their firepower on one group at a time. And unfortunately, that's exactly what does happen initially for that
Yep.
first hour, an hour and a half, whatever it is. Vierville draw, Colleville draw, too. Really similar
Yeah.
fights.
So
E Company and F Company 16th Infantry get decimated.
let me just jump in one quick
I hear a
second
voice
here.
from above, John.
Yes.
Let's hear what it has to say.
Hey,
Let's hear the voice.
the voice says, so John, Kevin, you both been to Omaha Beach, right? And it was quite an
Once or twice.
experience. I've been there too, I have to say. It was incredible. Spent
Yep.
a lot of time. And so we've walked the ground. We've seen, how these German positions fire right down the beach, how stiff the cliffs are and all that. But I think that the vast majority of Americans have experienced Omaha Beach only through Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
Yeah,
so, there's the
right.
famous shot of the MG 34 gunner, I think he is shooting into the landing craft, killing the guys as they're coming out and all that kind of stuff. Flamethrowers hitting the pillboxes, let them burn, right?
Right.
That is, I think, for most people, their idea of what Omaha Beach is. But that's really kind of one perspective. So, like, when you think of that movie and how Americans experience Omaha Beach through that movie, what are they really seeing of the story?
I would say of the landing craft going in, that's very accurate. And I think it was an MG-42 they're firing, and our friend Marty Morgan has done research to basically say there were no MG-42s on the beach. That kind of cold temperature, they would have jammed up. And I think, and by the way, Mark, you have a beautiful wife there in the background. Um, uh, Marty Morgan, I was talking about. Oh, and the Germans firing down. Oh, and the MG-42 has been kind of raised up to a certain level that, they're like, oh, it could fire, 20 bullets a second or whatever. And a lot of that's not, you don't really do that in combat. You do it in short
Right.
spurts and everything. But that whole concept where guys are getting slaughtered inside the landing craft before they can get out, yes. Once they get up the beach, that's when it's like, to me it's more of a set, because I'm like, well, I don't really remember this in any of my readings. The fact that they're using the BARs and everything, they're doing covering fire to get little groups across.
Mhm.
That's more of a director's interpretation, I would say, John.
Well, yeah, there's a number of things about this. I would say as a base point, yeah, I mean it's a brilliant film that conveys the desperation of the moment and some of the horror of it and whatnot. It almost like takes some of the worst things that happen on Omaha Beach and packs them together inside that 15-20 minutes. But there are some inaccuracies that nerds like us can spot, and it's why no one likes to see these movies with us. But so the log obstacles are pointed in the wrong direction.
Right.
I don't know why, but they are. There's no evidence that anybody used a flamethrower against a pillbox on D-Day at Omaha Beach.
But it sure looks
Um,
cool.
oh, it looks absolutely cool, and it also creates that moment of the guy saying, "Don't shoot, let him burn,"
Yep.
which does convey the ruthlessness of the fight, which is very real.
Yep.
And I would argue the whole machine gun thing is a little misleading because really the majority of the casualties are inflicted by artillery.
That's right.
Artillery, but to their credit, Captain Miller does say this. He says every inch of this beach has been pre-sighted. You stay here, you're dead men, and
Yep.
that's 100% right. It's really the inland 105 millimeter pieces that are inflicting the worst of the damage because artillery is the biggest killer and wounder. The machine guns have to have those good fields of fire to have that level of lethality. I suppose it was possible that they did that against a couple of landing craft in the 29th Division side. It didn't happen on the Big Red 1 side, First Division side.
Hmm.
The mortars and artillery, and of course the machine guns are part of it, but they're not just rowing them down like bowling pins out of the landing craft in that sense.
You know what I liked was the Bangalore torpedo, because I've
Yeah.
read about them and read about them, but I've never seen one actually where they hit the igniter and all that kind of stuff. So I really appreciated that. And then the one real nitpicky total nerd thing that, I was with my fiance at the time, and I'm like, hey, what? Ooh, she was going like the whole time. Um, but the sniper who uses a sniper rifle, which is called a Springfield rifle, which is the standard World War I rifle. In World War II, they used an M1 Garand rifle.
They
And
use Springfields too, though.
they did, but
They're heavy usage.
the Garand was more the accepted rifle. Yeah, there's that famous photo
Well, it
of
was
Second Infantry coming up with all the Springfields. But
Second
the point,
Division.
what?
Second Division. You're still
What did I
doing that.
say?
You armor person. Second
Oh,
Infantry. That means a regiment.
you damn ground pounders. Um, so when you would load the Garand, a lot of times you'd stick the ammo in and the chamber would catch your thumb and you get what's called M1 thumb, which is that bruise under your thumb. And Barry Pepper, I think, is the actor playing the
Hmm.
sniper with the Springfield rifle. And when he's holding it, you can see the M1 thumb. And so I
Yeah.
guess they trained them on all weapons and he somehow got M1 thumb. But
I
the
always
one
wonder
guy
what
with
that's
the
about.
yeah, the one guy with the sniper rifle has got M1 thumb.
You're expert
So
rifleman, and he's got a Springfield.
yeah.
I've always wondered how could that be. But I mean, the way they use the Springfield is very much spot on as a
Mhm.
sniper weapon. That's
But
how you would have done that.
I can imagine Spielberg making them train on all weapons and somewhere in there because that looked like a legit M1 thumb to me. That
It
wasn't
did.
makeup. That's all. If anybody's gotten a bruise under their nail, they know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and if you've had
So
M1 thumb, and it doesn't feel good. And yeah,
so
and if the
John,
weapon isn't cleaned,
you've used
you
an
don't feel
M1.
it.
I'm not a reenactor, but you've used an M1.
I have, and yeah, if you don't have the weapon properly cleaned, the bolt tends to slam forward more easily, and so you pay the price for it usually with your thumb. But and the way they would basically load the weapon is, the 8 round clip that you're familiar with, the bullets in that like stripper clip type thing,
Yep.
and you put it in the breech, but you get your thumb out of there quickly by supposedly like saluting the weapon. That's how they would have trained them back then. So you get that out and salute as quickly as possible. You wouldn't really do that in combat, obviously, but the point is you don't linger with your digits anywhere near that breach because
So I
they're
can
going to get
tell
nailed.
you, when I worked at the Combat Studies Institute at Fort Leavenworth, I helped teach ROTC instructors weapons, and so we brought them all down to a weapons range, and they started with flintlocks and worked all the way up to me with the M1 Garand. And I mean, it definitely had a slower action, this one particular one, but I think because I'm left-handed, I didn't have that M1 problem. I think the way my hand would go in would hold it back. And so maybe that was the key to not getting M1,
Yeah,
thumb was to be left-handed.
yeah. I mean, that could be. I don't know, but that could well be.
Yeah.
But it's so glaring. Barry Pepper's thumb. You see the bruise there, and I've always wondered about that, whether that's intentional or not, or
Yeah.
it's
And
one of the things I
here's
would
the big one
ask, I guess. But
with Saving Private Ryan. That first half hour is super intense. There's no denying it. But the battle didn't last a half hour. That thing lasted 6 hours. They landed at
of
6:30
course,
a.m. and did not
longer.
stop till 6:30 p.m. I don't think an audience would be able to sit through a fight for
Oh
Veerville
no,
draw.
I mean
But
it's
that's
film,
always one of
right?
those things. It's like people are like, "Wow, that was a really tough half hour." I'm like,
Yeah, it
it's
was
like,
longer. But if you think about the full expanse of the day, though, most of
yeah,
it fortunately isn't like that. And so I think it does unfortunately create the idea that everyone who lands at Omaha Beach is in the middle of this horrible fish in a barrel kind of situation.
right.
With guys getting blown apart and this really impervious German defensive system and whatnot. And
This
that's
wall
really a
of fire.
misnomer.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
more fluid fight, and it kind of depends where you land. There are dead spots in their defenses. Of course, after we're done with the first two, maybe 2.5 hours, the Germans are really on the road to defeat by then. Doesn't make it easy. It's
yep,
still a very dangerous place, but it's not quite that level of ferocity, as is
right.
portrayed there.
Well, so like, they really kind of land by companies, and a company is about 100 to 150 guys each,
About
and
180, yeah,
180 on D-Day.
for
Um,
infantry. Yeah.
for the infantry. And so, that first wave is the one that really gets hit. And I guess one of the myths, by the way, is that they close Omaha Beach. They did not close it. They closed part of Veerville Draw. And what they did, the guys didn't just not land there. They just shifted, to the east a little bit and then came ashore. And those guys, I think it was Company C, they have the higher survivability, not only because there's not as many German defenses, but there's also these kind of dikes going into the water, those sort of small wooden piers.
Mhm.
And Mark, like you were saying, the Germans aren't firing out from the beaches. They're firing across the beach. So if you
Exactly.
miss somebody with a bullet, it's going to eventually hit somebody. The chances are it's going to hit somebody else.
It's designed
So
that way.
yeah, so they're defended on their left and their right by those little wooden piers, the guys in C Company. And then fortunately, what is it?
116th, you mean?
Yes. And then you've got
Okay.
that whole Ranger battalion coming up, the 5th Rangers.
The 5th.
And
Hmm.
they really, while these guys are getting pounded in Veerville and other parts, these guys make it up the hill, start fanning out. And so Veerville is taken from behind. And that's how it's taken because the guys stay away from the draws, which the Germans know are important and they're going to defend. So they go to the weaker spots, just making up those hills, finding paths as they go and knowing they're not going to hit mines. And I think in some places tape had been laid either by engineers or the Germans.
Engineer tape. Yeah.
Yep. And so they make it to the top and then take Veerville and come down. In fact, they start getting shelled at Veerville because the Navy thinks these are German reinforcements coming down, or these are American prisoners, and they've got to basically use semaphore signals to get them to stop firing.
They're lucky they got him to stop firing at all because of Colleville, which of
Yep.
course is the town like so if you go to Omaha Beach today and you're standing on the beach and you look up, you see a church spire. That's the Colleville Church, and of course it's the same church that was there on D-Day. It's
And
obviously
that's
been rebuilt
John, that's
somewhat.
the eastern side of the beach, right? Is that
It
right? The
is.
east.
It's the side of the First Infantry Division, which had responsibility for the majority of the beach. So it's the beach is about what 4.5, maybe 5 miles, something like that. Well, they had about 60% of the beach, and so
Right.
Colville obviously was one of the key towns they had to take. And coming up the Colville Draw, which is one of the deadliest places to be because it's right beneath the most potent defenses the Germans have at Omaha Beach, WN 62, which is, bristling with some level of ordnance. But when G Company of the 16th Infantry comes in about 20 minutes after H hour, roughly, and they follow that path that some of the initial soldiers who got off Omaha Beach under Lieutenant John Spaulding and Tech Sergeant Phil Streisick, they're kind of heading inland, and it used to be the path you could take from the beach all the way up to the cemetery that overlooks the Omaha Beach. Now you can't do that anymore. But uh, G Company got into Colville that evening, so like late afternoon, early evening. The Navy had orders to open fire at 1800 hours, 6 p.m. And unless they heard otherwise, that it was under American control. They didn't hear otherwise. So G Company actually, Captain Joseph Dawson was the commander. His people suffer more deaths from our own Navy than from the Germans on D-Day. And so the naval support was a kind of double-edged sword.
Blessing and a
Um,
curse.
yeah, it really doesn't help prepare the beach at all, in addition to the aerial thing, like you were saying. But then it's one of the reasons why the Americans win at Omaha Beach, because these destroyers are coming in and nailing the pillbox at WN 65, all these other places, good,
And they're coming
accurate
in
fire.
dangerously shallow waters too.
Yeah, like a
Those
thousand
captains
yards
are putting their
offshore.
ships at risk for this. Yeah.
Yeah, big time. And they don't know that the Germans don't have, armor-piercing shells and some of their heavier guns that could be within range. So that took a lot of guts for
Yeah.
those skippers to do that. So they're doing incredible work. But then you have this other side of it where the communications aren't good. And
Yep.
so the ships are a danger to our own guys at times. It's just part of the tragedy of the whole situation.
And John, technically this is a first infantry fight because the
First
commander,
division.
first
I've got
division,
to get you
first infantry,
leaning
first
to it.
division. It is a first division fight because the division commander is in charge of the beach, but really it's the first division and the 29th. It's a
Yeah.
veteran, probably the most veteran unit in the first infantry division, known as the Big Red One. And then you've got these rookie National Guard guys on the western side of the beach. But to what I've seen, the lack of experience, super experience, it almost doesn't make a difference in those first couple of hours. I mean, what do you think? Would you agree or
I
disagree?
mean, I think they're both successful, and because
Yep.
they're both really good units that are very, very well trained. I do think that the Big Red One or First Division has a little bit more, a little quicker success because they do have that muscle memory. They've
Yep.
got people who have seen combat, who are willing to fight still, and who kind of know what to do in a really bad situation. And I mentioned a couple of them a moment ago. Lieutenant John Spaulding, although he's new, his ranking NCO, Tech Sergeant Phil Streisick, I think probably should have gotten the Medal of Honor for what he did on D-Day. He was just remarkable in the course of the day and helping lead some of the first soldiers off the beach. Another great example that isn't as well known. Staff Sergeant by the name of Raymond Strozny, who you've seen this, I'm sure, at WN 61, which is a pillbox, and
Yep.
it had an 88 millimeter gun in it. There were only two 88s on Omaha Beach, one at Veerville, and then one at near Colleville
And they're
at
perfect because it's a concave beach, like a big
yeah,
crescent. So if you put those two guns at either side, they can cover the whole beach. I
that's
mean,
what they're
brilliant
designed to.
defense.
It's brilliant defense. It's straight
Yeah,
in with those cones of fire. And
yeah.
so there's a pedestal gun too on top of that pillbox, a 50 millimeter pedestal gun, which is deadly to the landing craft, especially the famous Higgins boats.
Hmm.
So the 88 millimeter piece had been more or less neutralized by a tank, but the 50 millimeter gun was still a problem. And Strozny just gets a bazooka and just goes forward and keeps lobbing rockets at it. And he doesn't really hit and destroy the gun, but he hits a lot of the ammo nearby, and this dissuades the German crew from continuing to fight. And this
Yeah.
is I'm not
Having
going to
your
say it's a one man thing, but yeah, it's a pretty big
having
thing
your
he did.
ammunition blow up in your face can ruin your whole day, you
It
know?
definitely is going to make this a really downer of a day for these guys.
Yeah. Hey, you know
Absolutely.
what? You know what we got to talk about? The reason that all three of us know each other is our friend Keith Rocco.
Yeah. Yeah. Keith
Tell
Rocco,
us
brilliant
why
artist.
Keith Rocco, his name should be associated for the rest of our lives with Omaha Beach.
Whether he wants to be associated with us is another question altogether, I think.
He's
Or
stuck
maybe I'll
with
say
us.
with you. I don't know, but Keith Rocco is a brilliant artist. Very, very good guy. He's painted murals in practically any military-oriented museum you could imagine, including a great one of Omaha Beach at the Cantini First Division Museum in Wheaton, Illinois, in the Chicago, Illinois area. Keith has done a lot of work over the years, and of course, he became involved in a diorama project to portray Omaha Beach. Okay, so Keith does some of the artwork and the conceptual work and whatever, and a brilliant dioramist named Bernie Kempinski is the guy who actually did the detail work with the figures, with a big assist from a pretty young guy named Michael Ackerman, who you may know.
Hey, John,
And then,
just
of
in case
course,
someone doesn't know what a diorama is, I just want to make sure we're, putting it on the there. There we
there it
go.
is. Yeah. So
People
thanks,
on the
Mark. Absolutely.
podcast, there's a photo of it right now that you can't see.
Yeah. So it's just like a miniature representation of a real thing. So it has like, the terrain as it would have looked on D-Day. It's got little soldiers that are painted in beautiful detail as they were on D-Day,
Super cool
landing craft,
explosions. Yep.
little explosions, the log obstacles, the tetrahedra, which are like the crisscross metal things that you've got there, the beach, the vehicles, all this stuff. So it's beautifully done. And then of course, you and I contributed like video snippets toward it, and Mark Festoso, our amazing chief of staff and producer,
He
is
made
the
us look
guy who
really good on those things, man. He
which
like he notched the handsome up like 3 levels, and we really
it tells
appreciate
you
it.
how skilled he is. If he's able to
Yeah.
do that, I mean, what can't he do? I mean,
Yep.
so yeah, and so I'm very excited because actually this diorama, it's a traveling exhibit. And it's not just the diorama, by the way. There's some artwork, like Keith's artwork that goes with it. There's a
Hmm.
model of a destroyer. We were talking about the destroyers earlier. That's a tribute to them. And there's mannequins that are, basically like soldier mannequins, including a guy who's supposed to be a Gap Assault Team engineer. Um,
Life size
yeah, life
mannequins.
size. Exactly. So that goes along with it. And then obviously the diorama is the heart of the display. So we have this right now at my university, Missouri University of Science and Technology. It's on display in the library. And it's so neat because students are coming in, they're fascinated with this. I've several times just sort of hung out there and answered people's questions and talk about Omaha Beach and talk about the whole project that all of us were part of. I'm very proud of it because I just think it's a great educational piece, and it's going to go on to the First Division Museum eventually
Hmm.
after we have it. It was at the French Embassy last fall. You and I saw it
We got to
there.
see it. Yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah,
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 And
that's
it's
you
what
just
amazing
you
work.
mentioned it's actually two dioramas, right? It's
What?
Veerville draw, and then there's another one,
Hmm?
Colleville draw.
The Colville draw. Yeah,
Right.
so it's got the 29th Division side and the 1st Division side. It's the two distinct portions of the diorama. Yeah.
So, when I think of Keith Rocco, to me, he's an artist. So, like, this is almost like he's got his PhD doing this. But I got to know him because when I worked in the magazine world, we would always contact him and other artists, to use their art for either the cover or for the lead story, which makes for a perfect segue into me wanting to
Yes.
talk about our sponsor. This episode of Stump the Chumps is sponsored by WarfareHistoryNetwork.com, the online home of WW2 History Magazine and other fine military history publications from Sovereign Media. WW2 History Magazine features in depth articles on all aspects of World War II, and each is lavishly illustrated with historic photos, maps, combat art, and more. Visit www.warfarehistorynetwork.com to find all the WW2 history articles published over the last 25 years, plus just as many articles covering the whole history of armed conflict. Begin your digital subscription to access all the articles on the website, or sign up to receive a subscription to the print edition, or both. WarfareHistoryNetwork.com will take you to the front lines. And being that this is our premiere episode, I'm very excited that we have a sponsor. And I've worked for the magazine for ever since its inception. And John, we both worked for its predecessor, World War II magazine, which Carl Nam, and we'll have to have him on the show someday, basically started in his dad's living room in I think 1985, and then branched off and made other magazines. And so that's our sponsor for the day.
That's great stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, just another educational forum from my standpoint as a professor. I mean, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, and I
You
don't know
know?
about you, but ever since I was young, I guess I was a freshman in college when I first saw it, I would always go through the magazine once and just look at the pictures and read the subtitles and then go back and read stories, because that's what drew me in.
So
Yeah.
you're
Well,
talking
you
about
whet your
World War
appetite.
II magazine there? Is that what you're talking
Do I have a shot of one? No, I don't. I have
about?
them all over in another room. You want me to go grab one and hold it
No,
up?
we're good. We're good.
Okay.
So why don't we put a bow on Omaha Beach here? I
Okay.
can
Yeah.
just throw one last thought out for you guys.
Shoot.
Um, I always think that today in 2025, that Omaha Beach and June 6th, right, has become the de facto World War II memorialization day for Americans, right? Like I think back in the
Yes.
50s and 60s, it was probably December 7th, right? But today, December 7th comes and goes. Like maybe I see a posting on Facebook, but that's it.
Yeah, because
But
that was
June
kind of a
6th,
defeat.
all the networks are showing stuff from the
Mm,
Colleville Cemetery. All the people are speaking. The remaining veterans are kind of shown, and
yep.
everyone stops, right? And it's become the Memorialization Day. So since it's the one time maybe in the year all Americans think about World War II and they think about Omaha Beach, like what do you think is the one big kind of myth that kind of still we think about when we think about Omaha Beach today, right? Because
Well,
everyone's thinking about it.
I'll tell you, one of the things that really, really bugs me to this day, when I read in media stories that Omaha Beach and D-Day as a whole was a great turning point in World War II. It was not. The turning points in World War II had already happened at places like Stalingrad, El Alamein, Torch. It was a pivot point to ultimate Allied victory. And I wish that more people would look at it that way. I also think that one of the great myths, if we're talking about Omaha Beach, is that all the odds were stacked against us. We were almost certainly going to get pushed into the sea, that this was almost like a Hail Mary pass to win this thing. And I think as great as Private Ryan was, it kind of does create that impression a little bit when actually there were about maybe 1,100, 1,200 German defenders there. We had way more stuff, way more people, way more firepower. We were probably going to get ashore because we controlled the sea, we controlled the air, we could control our resupply and reinforcement, and it really doesn't minimize the level of sacrifice. It shows you what a sharp fight it was that we suffered the casualties we did. which is something or about 2,500 casualties or whatever. But I think we also do a little bit of a mythological disservice to blow it up too much.
Mhm.
So what I'm arguing for is scale and context, I guess, a little bit.
And I haven't encountered this, but I know several Omaha Beach historians and tour guides that have. And that's the impression that we lost thousands and thousands of men killed on D-Day at Omaha Beach. I think the numbers, it's 945, it's not quite 1,000, it's in 900s. And I think the reason is, well, first, people like to pump up numbers to make things seem like more of a tragedy. And it's the fact that I think they're mixing up the term casualty with killed. Casualty is a combination of killed, wounded, and captured, whereas killed is a specific number of people killed. Now, if you wanted to talk about casualties, yes, you easily crossed the 1,000 mark. But when it comes to Americans killed on D-Day at Omaha Beach, the number is a little bit higher than 900. It doesn't crack 1,000. John, agree, disagree?
Roughly.
Yeah,
Roughly. I mean, we're still kind of trying to pinpoint it. And actually, the National D-Day Memorial folks that have that
that's a big
major
goal of
project.
theirs. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really an amazing project to basically document every Allied fatality on D-Day, and it's harder than you would think because it can
Hmm.
be hard to figure out when someone actually died, and really document this in the record. So, we run up against that a little bit at Omaha Beach, and so in my estimation, I think my casualty estimate was a little on the lowball side because I only went with what I could actually document in the tangible record, and that
Right.
may not include everybody, but I think the point is we don't suffer thousands and thousands killed, anything like that, fortunately. It's a sharp fight, and the worst of it really is that first 2.5 hours or so. After that, it's fairly well along, and we are probably, almost certainly going to win. And so yeah, I would sort of sway us away from that mythology while still understanding just how difficult and hellacious of a fight this was for many who were there. So the other way to become a major casualty on D-Day was generally in the airborne. So that's the preponderance of our casualties as Americans, especially
Right.
those two places.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys.
Mark, were we right? Did we answer that question correctly?
Yeah,
Wasn't there a right answer?
I'll give you an A minus. That's okay. All
Hey,
right.
am I all right? Wow.
Yeah.
Better
See,
than I
I
did in
would tell
school.
everyone out there, like, if the best thing I ever read about Omaha Beach was Ernie Pyle's article, where he
Where he
just
finds the
walks down the
tennis
beach and
racket.
he's just describing all the stuff he's seeing, right? And he's like a tennis racket, golf clubs,
Mhm.
cigarettes. And then he ends on the bluff, and there's like some 17-year-old German kid with mismatched uniform behind barbed wire looking out at this massive fleet. And that's it. That speaks to what you're saying about it. It was over at that point, really, right? It's
Yep.
I love that because he says for no reason at all, I picked up the tennis racket
yeah,
and carried it for a while. And it's like, yeah, that's nonsensical, but that's what combat and everything is. It's
yeah.
Right.
nonsensical.
Well,
So yeah,
it
Yeah.
goes to that really I think kind of horrible but funny 1960s Battle of the Bulge movie with Telly
ugh.
Oh,
Savalas,
awful.
and
Yeah,
the
we'll do an
guy's like,
episode on that.
the
We'll talk
Americans
coming
have
up.
chocolate cake, like they're gonna win, right? They can bring chocolate cake, right? It's that same kind of crazy idea.
So
And then just
silly.
for our listeners who don't know, Ernie Pyle was a very famous
Yes.
reporter who, before the war, would kind of travel around the United States and give these little vignettes of places. And so when he goes overseas, he starts hanging not just with the combat troops, but a lot of like supply and troops that you wouldn't even know exist and telling their stories. And so it almost painted a perfect picture for people at home wondering what was going on. And so he really was probably our best window into what frontline and what a GI's life is like overseas fighting, and just what a contribution he gave to morale to the United States. And of course, he doesn't live out the war. He is killed
Yeah.
by a sniper, I believe, off of Okinawa, or is it?
Correct. Yeah.
Probably not a sniper. It was at Ishima, and it was probably a machine gun position.
Okay, yeah,
Ernie Pyle,
Yeah, he was.
he's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that account you're talking about, Mark, I think is in a book called Brave Men,
Brave
because he had
men.
two books. Here is your war, and I think
Yeah.
his second one was called Brave Men. I think it's in that one, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Brave
It's
Well,
in
men.
either that or Here is your war. They're both
yeah,
amazing books.
whatever this one is backwards.
That
Yeah, Ernie's War. I think
Ernie's
I read.
War, though that's a book about him.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot of his dispatches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Brave
yeah,
Man is great. Brave Man also has, not to get off topic, but the famous Captain Waskowitz,
Yeah.
um,
yeah.
Bosco, yeah.
which
We
is
can do an
from
episode on that at
Italy,
some point.
and
We
it's the
should.
soldiers
Yeah.
seeing their dead captain being brought down. And
Holding his
for
hand.
personally, the first time I ever heard that story was at the groundbreaking for the World War II memorial here in Washington, D.C., and I
Mm.
heard it read by Tom Hanks.
Wow.
Hey.
Wow, it was a great moment, great moment.
How do you top that?
Yeah, I
Wow.
don't know. I'm living the dream, people, living the dream.
Aren't
Yeah,
we all?
yeah,
Yeah.
So, Mark, we talked about at the beginning of the show that we were going to take people's questions.
yes,
We all sent out to our friends to get us
yeah.
kind of started here, and they told two friends, and they told two friends.
And
Um,
so on and so
and so
on.
what we're asking is for people to send us emails at ww2live@gmail. And so that's ww the number two live@gmail.com. And people can ask anything they want and try to kind of stump the chumps. It would be great if people would tell us where they're from. And we'll read their question. Mark will read their questions and see if we can answer. So you guys want to try a few?
Let's
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Okay, so hang on to your hats because we got, some crazy questions.
My Ernie
Uh,
Pyle hat. There we
oh,
go.
it's like Radar O'Reilly over there. You got your grape knee high
Yeah,
ready?
Jesus.
Okay,
I mean, Patton's gonna slap me for wearing this thing.
all
Okay.
right.
Yeah, well, that'll be our next episode.
Yeah.
I'd pay to
Okay,
see that, by the way. Mm.
Patton. So this is from Jacqueline. I'm not sure
Okay.
where she's from. She says, "Do you think any of the important World War II generals were secretly gay?"
Oh,
That's a modern question.
Definitely a
Um,
modern question.
people talk about General Patton because he had such that machismo, that
Yeah.
macho image. Um, but there's letters between him and his wife where he's apologizing to her for the way he is in the sack, and he's kind of insecure about that. Um, he's so heavy-handed and things like that
Mhm.
and he's really embarrassed because he's this really tall guy and he's got a high-pitched kind of voice. And so but I would never want to associate tone of voice with someone's sexuality. Um, but that's something that really wasn't spoken about then. The only way
Right.
you would know about it is if there was a court martial, and they were not uncommon because you think about it, you're taking hundreds of men, moving them away from any women, especially in the Pacific, and things are going to happen. Um, there's nothing that I've come across that would tell me that Patton or any of the generals around him that anybody kind of questioned their masculinity or sexuality. Patton, of course, did have a mistress, Jean Gordon, his niece, but fortunately was on his wife's side, so it's not so bad. Um, but none of the generals, to my knowledge, have I seen any kind of evidence left or right. John, what about you?
so I don't think any of the most famous generals, but like you said, Kevin, you're talking about a broad universe of people. Statistically speaking, some people are gay. I mean,
Yep.
that's the reality. Okay,
Yeah.
so I will give you a little data point. Um, in research I did about New Guinea for a trilogy I did in the Army in the Pacific Asia theater.
Mhm.
There were allusions in some of the records that related to morale and just sort of everyday life and the issues they were encountering. And there were serious problems on New Guinea, not just with disease, but with mindset and morale and criminality and these kinds of things. They alluded to court martials against gay people.
Yep.
That the one of the commands, not MacArthur's command, but one under him, had started to go in and try and investigate and ferret people out, including, they alluded to, a general officer. So I don't know who it is, but there was somebody they were investigating for homosexuality in those days. I mean, this is really horrifying, honestly. In those days, you would basically be Section 8 out of the Army with a
Yeah.
dishonorable discharge and no benefits. And
Homosexuality
there
was
was,
considered a mental, disease,
oh, yeah,
you know. Yeah.
right. It was quite a
Until the
stigma. And it
early
was,
1970s.
It's not until the 1970s,
Yeah,
post-Vietnam era, that you start to see a change. And even then, obviously, they were not officially accepting gay people until the 1990s. And of
right.
course, there were gay people all along. We all know that. And so I think it's a great question because I'm sure there probably were some general officers, maybe just in that little anecdote based on what I saw, but I can't name somebody in particular for you.
You know where I read about that was William Manchester's Goodbye Darkness.
Yes.
There was an
Hmm.
officer or something, and I remember them, and the court martial and the guys are kind of like, freaking out by the language in there. So and so put his member in someone's mouth or asked him to or something like that. And I can't remember. They had a battalion commander or somebody who was a little screwy in the head that he created like a fly catcher, and the guys had to go around and catch flies and put it inside the fly catcher. And I can't remember if he was the one accused of homosexuality or was a different officer. But Manchester really right. It's his basically personal memoir as a Marine fighting in World War II. And Manchester famously goes on to be a very well-known historian, a very prolific author. But that's one of the first places I've encountered. I'm trying to think. I also believe I read a firsthand account about homosexuality in World War II in Studs Terkel's book, The Good
Oh,
War.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah.
good war.
So it's really
Yeah.
anecdotal evidence of homosexuality in World War
I
II
mean,
more than anything else,
I found quite a lot of evidence just among everyday troops. I'm talking
right?
about general officers. That's the only allusion I've ever seen to a general officer, but there must
Okay.
have been some, or admiral, whichever.
And there is a statistic of the percentage of homosexuality in troops in World War II. I remember going through and I was like stunned at first, but I'm like, well, again, you've separated all the males and females in society, and people are going to be people. And so even though people don't talk about it, I was impressed that they were able to pull a statistic out.
Well, another example I'd give you is the novel, The Thin Red Line, James Jones's novel,
Okay. I haven't read
which
it.
basically, it's the character Fife, played later in the movie by Adrian Brody.
Hmm.
He and another soldier in the unit are portrayed as having a relationship, and it being not that unusual, and it's probably going on with others. So this is Jones, who of course was actually there with
Right.
the 27th Infantry of the 25th Division. That's what he maybe saw. But again, the question was about general officers. That's a little bit of a different animal, but people are people. So I
Yep.
would suppose yes. I would suppose the answer is yes, I
Yeah.
think.
Look at
Well,
that. We
certainly from
survived our first question.
well, certainly from, yeah, congratulations. That's your real hot potato. Just one thing on that, as you were talking, we're talking about the American Army and the American generals, right? There was a campaign, I would say, in the West to paint German generals as homosexuals, right? The Night of the Long Knives, like
Hmm.
they were all supposed to be gay, so we want to get them out. And Himmler has alluded to all this kind of stuff. So it's not only us saying, we're going to hide this, it's not good, but it's also painting our enemies to be that, to show that they are less than.
Well, who was the
Right.
German commander of the SA? Rome,
Yeah,
who had
Rome.
the fake,
Ernst
He was
Rome.
supposed
he
to
had the
be the
fake
leading,
nose,
like a
And he
gay
really was
orgy the
gay.
night that
yeah,
they did the murders
Yeah,
of.
he really was gay. I mean,
yeah,
that part
and
is
he was.
true. But
And now I don't know if it's all fact or part myth, but he when they get rid of the SA in like a big purge one morning, that they break into his room and he's in bed with another man. But some of the stories said that Hitler was on the other side of the door banging it open, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if what percentage of this is propaganda, what part is truth, but
Yeah.
that was something they held against Rome, and used it to force him out as head of the SA. So it's part of history.
All right, congratulations, gentlemen. You've passed the first test.
Ugh. All
All
right. See you
right.
guys later.
Um, let's go to the next one. So the next one is broad question. So that was
Okay.
very specific, broad.
We
This is
really
from.
shouldn't refer to them as broads.
Oh,
They're women.
sorry. That's okay. This is a wide-ranging question.
Okay.
That term's appropriate for the 40s, though, I think, broad,
Okay.
right? Um,
Dame.
very,
We prefer
very
Dame, guys.
common.
Dame, right?
Dame.
Yeah, Dame.
Ain't nothing like
From
them.
Brian, he says, please discuss Rommel's desert campaign. What made it so successful and why did it ultimately fail?
In three
Wow,
words or less.
3 words or less. I mean, I would just say, on that, when I was a sixth grader, right?
Hmm.
Uh, my teachers, we were writing reports. We were learning how to write reports. And in sixth grade, my teacher said, "You can write a report on anything you want." And I think before the words were out of her mouth, my arm was up and I was like, Rommel, I'm doing Rommel.
God, I hope this
Um,
wasn't a Catholic school you were in.
no, and it was awesome. It was great, right? So there's obviously a fascination with kind of Rommel and Germans in Africa. And I think one thing that when I talk to people with kind of general knowledge, the one thing I hear over and over and over and is if Rommel only had one more Panzer division, he would have won, right?
Brother.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, right. So I'll just talk about when I think of Rommel when I was a kid, we'd buy all those modeling kits and there were tanks, P-51s, fighter craft, bombers, tanks, jeeps, but there was the Rommel limo. And that was, I think every kid wanted to be that. Have your driver up front, you're in the back, you got the officer's cap on with the stolen British goggles, that he would bring down. Those were actually British aviation goggles and he looks so cool. It couldn't be denied. So basically, what happened? So you have North Africa, which is the colonial territory of the British and the French and the Italians. And I guess, John, is it? I guess it's 40. It's not 41 that the Italians attacked the Brits, hoping to wipe them out.
In Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Brits fight back and kind of clean the field of the Italians. And so, because of that, Hitler sends troops to North Africa. And it's not a lot, they're actually mostly, Rommel doesn't always fights with more Italians than Germans when he fights. And it's a corps. That's why they call it the Africa Corps. It's not a whole army. And they tell him, hey, just put on a little bit of a show, keep the British pinned down. And he goes on these big offensives that really intimidate the British. And they are going to fight defeat after defeat after defeat until you get to El Alamein, which isn't until 1942. So they've had all of these defeats. He's gone kind of through general after general, and they bring Montgomery down. And now a lot of Americans know Montgomery, and we criticize him a lot because we plotting, and he's going after Eisenhower's job, and he's kind of brusque, and he doesn't seem to be a good ally. But what Montgomery sees to his credit is before he gets there, all the other generals, Churchill's like, oh, we got to send troops, to Greece. We got to send troops. And he keeps breaking up these army units that if they had been intact, probably would have been a lot more successful. And so Montgomery's like, nobody's touching my guys. We're going to stay intact. He trains everybody to like a fine edge. And then really the Germans have kind of been defeated on the defense when he gets there. But then he goes on the offensive and he understands the terrain. There's marshy areas that he knows not to go that Rommel's not familiar with. So he's able to sort of outflank and push him back. And as he's pushing him back, you're getting into November of 1942. That's when the Americans and British are going to land in Morocco and Algiers, and they're going to kind of sandwich Rommel between them. But I've been talking for way too long. John, you say something, damn it.
So what I'm going to say is going to be provocative to all the Rommel lovers out there. When I was in junior high, just like Mark, I had classmates who were big into Rommel and admired him and all that kind of stuff. And I admit he's fascinating and he's cool, and he was a fine commander at some level. He was a good division commander. He was a good corps commander when he was facing a kind of undermanned, undercommanded, logistically not that well off Commonwealth army. And certainly he does win some battles in North Africa. Maybe the best one is Tobruk in June 1942 when he besieges the Australians and others there, forces their surrender. But really, in the end, what does Rommel gain for his country and his side? A lot of sand. It's a lot of tactical victories that sort of look good, that are dramatic on some level, but really don't matter much strategically. And I think the justification for that has been like what Mark alluded to. If they'd only given him another division, if they'd only done
One
this,
more
that, or
tank.
the other thing,
One more
one more
tank.
tank, one more this and that, and you know what? I mean, I'm sorry. There just aren't a lot of strategic results. And I will say this, and again, and this could be provocative. Rommel was a centerpiece of German propaganda in World War II. He was the fair-haired boy. Hitler loved him, and German propaganda blew him up into this massive deal, promoted to field marshal and all that business. And I think, in a way, that German propaganda has survived into our own time because of this idea that he's some sort of genius. But if you really step back and say, what results did he bring on a strategic level to his country? The answer is next to nothing and nil.
I would
And he
disagree, John.
completely,
I would disagree. I'd say defeat because of his success, he was told to just kind of like do shadow stuff, and he goes on these big offensive, consuming fuel, ammunition,
hmm,
making this a bigger theater, taking away troops from Russia or the Soviet Union, the bigger fight,
well,
and
true.
he's almost condemning Germany to defeat by taking the center of gravity away from their big fight that is decisive in the Soviet Union to a sandy beach, and the first stuff I initially read, Trail of the Fox, the Irving book, you're like, wow, he's so fascinating and he understands armor. And then the books I've read since, there's one on the Mediterranean that really kind of
Hmm.
exposes him and says, yeah, he was running this thing on a shoestring.
Yeah.
And everybody in like Italy and Germany is like, what are you doing? You idiot. You're taking all this stuff, that is needed in other theaters, and you're just recklessly smashing into guys in a theater that's irrelevant. You're drawing supplies and men and doing all these maneuvers that have zero significance, and then his other great contribution is the American army has to start somewhere. And President Roosevelt, I mean, George C. Marshall, the head of the military, says, well, yeah, we got to go into Europe and knock out the Germans. And Roosevelt's like, no, 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 we got to get involved now. Joseph Stalin is losing lots of troops. We got to prove we're legit. And we got to go somewhere where we can't lose. So where do we go? North Africa. Now, the first fights are against the Vichy French, that are not well equipped and their loyalty is definitely questionable and works in our to our advantage. But then we get into Tunisia, and Rommel basically, he's there for a little while, but he gets pulled out. But it's the fighting in Tunisia that gives the U.S. Army its experience. And that is vital. And it's all because Rommel was dumb enough to do all this stuff.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, yeah. So it doesn't sound like you disagree with me. It sounds like you
I agree
would
with
take
you,
it
but
to a new
yeah,
level. I
yes.
mean, let's talk about what happens in France. I mean, this is a man who thinks you're going to stop the Allies at the waterline and invests everything toward that and wants to expose his armor near the coastline to our navies. I mean, had he not studied Anzio? Had he not studied Salerno and Sicily? It's
And
amazing to me that this
John, he
supposed
doesn't have
brilliant
Oh, we're
guy.
gonna get some comments, John.
he doesn't
I
have
mean,
any experience with amphibious fighting.
he
Yeah.
has none, and it shows.
Zero.
But I think part of this too is this idea of Rommel as the good German, and how he had a heart in the end, and he opposed Hitler in the end, or whatever. And yeah, he flirted with the plotters, and
Yep.
in 1944 and all that. But remember too, he once was the commander of Hitler's bodyguard, and
Exactly.
so let's not you know promote him to sainthood. And I'm not saying he's a terrible guy or anything either. And I think he's a fine commander on some level, but he's a bit out of his depth once
Yeah.
he's
He
Yeah.
doesn't he,
promoted high
he doesn't
enough.
see it strategically. He's like,
He
let
doesn't.
me if
Yeah.
I go on this
Zero
offensive,
strategic results.
I
And
can
here,
force yeah,
just to speak to that one thing, John, right? So I'm now 50 something. I'm not the sixth grade kid, and I've
damn, you're
continued
old.
to read about Rommel. And so, the shine is off the brass there with
I
him.
know I hate to puncture that
Uh
that
That's all
that
right. But,
bubble.
to speak exactly to your thing about the lack of strategic success, right? I was reading, I forget when recently, I think it was Barry Pitt, right? He wrote those three books, right? Excellent books from the British perspective. And he's talking about when Tobruk falls, which you mentioned, a great success, right? And the question is, what do you do after that? How do you follow that up? Because it happened quicker than they thought, like France. Like France fell way quicker than the Germans thought it was going to be. And they're like, what do we do? So, what do you do when Tobruk falls? Well, the plan, as I understand it, was to focus on capturing Malta. Now, that's more of a strategic success. If you own Malta, that's huge.
yeah.
But Rommel, because he's Rommel and he's this big propaganda personality basically browbeats his superiors to say, no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to charge off into the desert into oblivion.
Into
Woohoo!
El Alamein, which is
What
a
could
road to
possibly go
Right.
nowhere.
wrong?
And
You
there
know?
he could have had a big, and I look at him like, what are you doing? Take Malta. It's
Mhm.
much more important.
Yeah, it's a great
So,
point, Mark. It's a classic
anyways,
example of what I'm talking about.
all right.
And
That's
Mark,
Yeah.
I'm
the
just,
the
I
geekiness of
just,
me coming out there.
just for the record, Mark, I just want to say thank you for taking off your Rommel uniform right before we started the show. So yeah, I'm glad to see that you have disassociated yourself with
We
him.
do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that is
welcome.
good. It would have been a little awkward if you'd had that on when he asked the question. I know.
Yeah, it's hard. My wife, she makes me take it off. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's for the best.
all right. Well, I'm sure that we'll revisit the North African campaign because it's ultimately fascinating, if vaguely relevant.
John has
Uh,
written about the 3rd Infantry Division, which fought in North Africa, and
yes.
I've written about George S. Patton, who really got his start in North Africa. So yeah,
Rommel, I read
Yep.
your book, the famous line from the movie.
Which is
yes,
also
because
which
the
is
movie
also
is
just so
reality.
I love it. Here we go.
That's
Yeah,
Well,
right.
we'll have to do a whole episode about the movie Patton because it's
Of
awesome.
definitely.
course.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
So when I was a freshman in high school, VCRs were new, right?
I
Mhm.
remember.
And I had one tape, Patton. And I would come home, get my cookies and milk, salute the TV, and watch Patton.
The perfect way to spend the afternoon.
There you
Yep.
go.
All right. Let's one more question. You guys up for one
Yeah.
more?
One more and then we should wrap up, I think.
Okay. Can you discuss the Battle of Kiev in 1941? I've
Mhm.
always been interested in Adolf Hitler's offensive on the Soviet Union, and given recent events in that geographical region, this battle interests me even more. And that's from Lauren.
So Kevin will take that one.
Yeah. So, um, Kiev, as we know now, is in the Ukraine. Um, and at the time, it was part of the Soviet Union, which is relevant because that is very much a part of what Vladimir Putin is trying to do is rebuild the Soviet Union. Um, but let me see. Let me try to think here. Kiev, that was one of the early battles south of the Pripyat marshes, and one of the bigger victories for the Germans. I believe they used 2 armored divisions to encircle an entire Soviet army. Um, and it's one of those examples of German mobility and power early in the war, and the fact that the Soviet Union can lose so many numbers and still put on a fight, you
Mhm.
know. Whereas if this battle had taken place in France, in Italy, or North Africa, it would have been decisive. It would have been a knockout blow. But the Soviet Union, with at that time almost seamlessly endless, a reservoir of troops and equipment, are able to keep fighting after this huge defeat. It is one of the summer battles. Um, and
September.
part,
Yeah.
say what?
September.
September. Yeah.
September, yeah. On the march back then, the march was to Moscow, and uh, and that's really all I got off the top of
So,
my head.
so some people think it robbed Moscow, the push for Moscow, some level of momentum and strength, and thus maybe not really worth the price they paid for it, even though it's quite brilliant operationally with the pincers moves and all that. And Kyiv was a major objective and could have been a great communication and political center for them had they treated Ukrainians properly. But they are who they are. They're Nazis, and all Eastern Europeans to them are subhumans. So Kiev, as I understand, has become a little bit controversial in that sense of maybe robbing the momentum of getting Moscow later on. But I think what I take from it more than anything is what the German capture of the Ukrainian capital means for not just Ukrainians in the time to come, but the Jewish population, because it's here we see one of the worst slaughters of this phase of the Holocaust at a place called Babi Yar, which tragically became a battleground again 3 years ago.
Yep.
33,000 Jewish people were killed in the space of, I don't know, a few days, something like that, in a ravine. All of that is a byproduct of this particular battle. And I think on some level, maybe that is what becomes really significant about it in the long run, especially from a Jewish perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything I can add, but you kind of nailed it
Mm.
right there. And and that's John, you alluded to that. the one big thing, I think it's almost even bigger in the Soviet Union than it is in the other occupied territories, is just the partisan fighting behind the lines. I mean, Germans couldn't go out at night. The supply lines are constantly being attacked. Now, part of that is, and you see this in summer of 44 on, that partisan groups tend to be more active when there's a fighting front. So before D-Day, there's communication and things going on, but there's not a lot of heavy action in the partisan movement. Once D-Day comes in, they realize liberation's coming. Now we attack bridges and communications lines, and so there's basically divisions living in woods and wooded areas and stuff that the Germans just cannot put their fingers on, and they just fight, tooth and nail. They're not. No partisan is going to surrender. This partisan, if they surrender, they're dead. And so that makes them tough fighters and very feared fighters for this very professional army. And so it's kind of hats off to them. And you know what? I'm glad that question got asked, because there is an effort in the world today to downplay the contributions of the Ukrainians in World War II. And so we kind of owe it to the Ukrainians to stay to the truth, appreciate what they did. And that's another element. And when you asked the question, it kind of threw me off, because when I was growing up, it was the Battle of Kiev. And when I started hearing it on the news reported as Kiev, I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? And then I realized they are talking about the same place. So when you're watching the news and you hear Kiev, they are talking about Kiev.
Yeah, and Kharkiv was always Kharkov when I was studying.
Mhm.
So
There you
Yeah,
go.
right.
yeah, just
Yep.
to talk to your point about the partisans, just to the northeast of Kiev is the Pripyat Marshes, right?
Yes.
Which became a hotbed for partisans because, the Germans couldn't really penetrate this marsh. And that
Mhm.
played a role in funneling that big 50 or 40-mile convoy that was trying to get to Kiev early in the current war, because they had to kind of go in
Yeah.
between this marsh, right? So,
Yeah.
a little bit of geography there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Woohoo.
All right, so those are some great questions. You handled them well, even though you really kind of hot potato there. So now let's talk the little final segment here. What you doing, right? So what are you guys up to these days?
John, you take it first. What you up to? What did you read?
Well,
What have you seen? What have you studied? World War
um,
II.
yeah, I'll keep it reasonably brief in terms of what I'm up to. Last night, actually, I taught my World War II course and focused on the Holocaust, including some elements of what went on in Ukraine.
Okay.
So I did that, but I mentioned the diorama and display, and we've got that going on at the library at Missouri S&T. So tomorrow night, I'm giving a lecture actually about Omaha Beach and about the Big Red One at Omaha Beach. So that's what's front and center for me these last couple of days and what's right ahead.
Okay. So mine, I almost wanted to dedicate the show to it because I'm so angry about it. I'll tell you what I'm up to. So I was working on my book the other day, and of course, this is the third volume of a three-volume, of a trilogy on George S. Patton. And John, you've had this where you write a book, and when you're done, you find some other source, and you go, "Oh, why didn't I put that in my book? It's too late." Well, I'm going to amp it up a level because this is so embarrassing, and it's happened with each volume. Um, I'm writing about Patton in 1945, and I was going through my old articles. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of vets, written about a lot of battles. I've gone to millions of battlefields, and I'm going through this interview I did with a guy from the 10th Armored Division, and he said, "Oh, when we first arrived in 1944, we get out to this field and Patton talks to us, and he's like, I don't care if it takes a truck full of dog tags of dead guys. We're taking the next objective." And then he said the next morning they get up and they climb into their tanks and they're heading out, for their first, occupation of the line. And Patton is standing on like an interview and waving to each tank as they go by. And he's like, "God, that was so motivating. I can't believe, a three-star general." And I'm like, I don't remember putting that in volume two. And I went and pulled volume two and looked it up and I missed it. So it's bad enough when you miss a source, but when it's your own source that you have written, it's just so embarrassing.
Especially
So
frustrating.
that
Yeah.
is what I've been up to, with kicking myself for failing to get that sentence about that into volume two.
Ah, bummer.
Yeah. So, but
Oh
we
well,
continue on. We find more stories.
we
Guys,
do.
did we do it? Did we do it?
We did. Well, I think that puts a bow on this one. This has just been a blast. Talking
Yep.
Omaha Beach, taking questions, looking at the map that Mark put up. I mean,
Yep.
all the above. This has been amazing. So, one more time, if you want to send us questions for future episodes, email us at ww2live@gmail.com. That's ww2live with a numeral two at gmail.com. So. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Mark. And
Oh yeah.
so long until next time. Take care.
Rock and roll, man. Take care, guys.